Oh no. It is the December month again, which means one thing. Oh, it is gifting season again. But whereas back in the day, this would be a time you'd be massively looking forward to, eagerly awaiting what Christmas presents you would get, honing your snowball fighting skills, but above all, just spending those 2 weeks of winter vacation doing absolutely nothing at all but playing games with your friends. Nowadays, when the gifting season rolls around, it's not necessarily what it used to be. Because, let's face it, 2 weeks of carefree winter vacation? Yeah, that ain't happening no more. Either it's absolutely impossible to get vacation during this time, or even if you have days off, projects, deadlines, and assignments, they don't really get time off, not even for Christmas. But worst of all is that gifting season, because nowadays you don't get the luxury of just waking up and seeing what Santa has brought to you. No. Now you have to deal with the horrors of trying to find presents for your family and friends. Or even worse, trying to find presents for yourself. I don't know if it's just me, but I just found the last few years it's gotten so incredibly hard to find any sort of good presents to ask for the holidays. Whereas as a kid, it was so easy to just be happy with small presents. Like, just give me like a duck or a car and I'll find some way to keep myself occupied with this for the entire rest of the year. As a quote-unquote grown-up, I've just gotten so freaking greedy. Back in the day, you only had to spend a couple of bucks to buy a rubber duck like this to keep me distracted, because if I hit it, it makes a noise. Nowadays, if you want to gift me something to keep me distracted, well, be prepared to spend a couple of $100 to buy a smartphone like this, where I can watch the latest TikToks. And if you want to spend just a little bit more, you could decide to buy a card like this for like 20 bucks or so. Like, that would be a really good model, which I would be so happy with, because I could add that to my collection. Nowadays, if you want to give me something that I can add to my collection, which I'm missing, well, spend about $800 to buy a DSLR, because that's the camera I don't have, and that will be so handy for my trip to overseas. As we grow older, our desires grow bigger and more expensive. But it's not just that we become more greedy, that we can't appreciate the small stuff anymore. No, it's far worse. The reason why we only ask the expensive stuff is, well, because we've already bought the small stuff. Once you start getting a little bit of spare money, it is so easy to just go out to the store and buy something that's relatively cheap because, you know, it's out there, I can get it. And that becomes a big problem when it comes to the holidays. Whether you're supposed to gift someone who already has everything within a reasonable price range, and you can only really make happy with super expensive stuff. What you get them is a shitty gift. I don't even need to explain what a shitty gift is. You already know, because all these websites are filled with these gift ideas of great things, which are like, you're into gaming? Well, you'll probably like this, which you'll unwrap, look at, be like, oh, that's cute, and then throw away the next day. This is so wasteful. But then having a Christmas without presents is also not fun at all. So what can you give? What about some actual useful gifts? Today, I've actually gone around and acquired a whole bunch of stuff which, number one, is under $100, and number two, is actually useful enough that I kept it around. Then again, I also kept this thing around, so watch the entire video and then by the end, you decide whether I'm a good judge of what's useful or not. Now, normally these videos always start out with like a bunch of garbage at the start and then like, you gotta wait till the end with the most useful stuff. Well, not today. We're starting out with the most useful option and my strongest recommendation from this entire video. This right here is the iFixit Pro Tech Toolkit, which is like a very useful set of tools, which costs 50 bucks and has saved me so much money over the past few years. This kit right here comes in this very handy case, which just opens up and displays all the tools in front of you. A lot of these tools right here seem like they belong in some sort of surgeon's office and not really in a toolkit run by an idiot like me, and they're all designed to do the same thing that surgeons do, which is getting people open, or I mean getting things open. For the longest time, the best way to get into a device was with a trusty old flathead screwdriver. Like, trust me, this thing has seen some abuse and it will deal some abuse. This thing will get into anywhere, but it will not be good. Right here we have a plastic and rubber phone case. Let's see if we can get it open with this thing right here. And number one and number two. That's partly open, but as you can see right here, it is it's also not in a very great condition. Now, I can do that with this old phone case, which honestly, like, it's been damaged before and I don't really use it anymore. But if you want to get into your undamaged, very neat looking device, you don't really want to be using one of these things right here. Instead, you probably want to use a tool that says, this tool is designed to break before your device does. Like, all of this is very much designed to protect your device while you're trying to open it up. But what if you actually have a sensible device that's held together by screws? Well, that's where this comes in. The fold of all the screw bits. Look at that. This beauty right here is honestly like one of the best things out of this toolkit, because this right here has so many different kinds of screws that you will need. Because if you've ever tried to open up some sort of popular device like this Game Boy right here, you'll probably have noticed one thing. They often use screws which you don't really have. Generally, these things are called security screws, and the entire point of their design is to have them be screws that you do not have the screwdriver to. Such that if this thing breaks, you either have to bring it back to Nintendo or you just have to buy a brand new device. However, this kit right here has pretty much every single security bit that you may need. For instance, this thing right here where we have like the tri-wing, we have it right here to open up this thing in one go. Or what about these Game Boy cartridges that have like this weird nut thing right here? Well, guess what? It has it as well. There you go. This makes this toolkit like the most useful thing that I've bought in years. As an example, I have this Xbox controller right here, which is used but mostly fine. However, its D-pad right here was completely broken, like one of the switches wouldn't connect anymore. Now, a new one of this cost like 60 to 70 bucks. However, for just $2, I was able to replace like the little rubber dome that's underneath here, and it works again. It actually allows you to save a lot of money over time. But what if you're not into giving something as boring as tools, and you want to give something a little bit more playful, a little bit more colorful? This right here is an iPod mini, which came out in 2005, so you won't be able to buy this anything new. However, you can find these like secondhand for like 50 bucks for like really good ones. The nice thing about these is that generally these things are still very, very usable, especially if you upgrade the storage within them. And honestly, I've just so much enjoyed having a device like this to just carry around and listen to music to. I don't know how to say it otherwise. I could talk about how this thing is smaller and thus more pocketable than this thing right here. I can talk about like how this thing has like a metal case such that it's not as fragile as this thing right here if you go out running with it or whatever. But more importantly, this thing's just fun. It still feels like super nice to use, and like just being able to just listen to music and not have any notifications stream in because you have to stream via online. I use this iPod right here on like a daily basis, and so far it's just been fantastic in just listening to music. Do be aware that you get like the second generation model, which has like the same color like menu things right here as like the device color, because these are the ones that you can actually upgrade with like extra storage, so you can like store all of your music and all of your podcasts on there. The way to open these things up is actually quite easy to do, as I've shown in the video right here. But then you can get something like 120 gigs of storage in like a device that only had 4 gigabytes when it came out. Like, you can just supercharge these things so much. The only thing that you may have to check out is maybe the battery is not as good, but then for like 10 bucks or so, you can get like an iFixit iPod battery, which you can just swap in, and there you go. But what if you already have a music listening device that you like listening to, so you don't need another one? Well, then you may want to look into upgrading your listening experience. These right here are like KZ Citizen Pro X's, which are a set of wired earphones, which honestly sound fantastic. I think they're like 10 or 20 bucks at most. These things just sound so good for like the cheap earbuds that they are. Now, unfortunately, I have very little experience like the audiophile stuff of like headphones and earphones and like what to compare them to, so I don't really know how to explain this very well. But take it from a guy like me, who back in the day would stock up on like these cheap ass earbuds that you got from like touring stuffs that you did, which were like the most cheaply made hollow sounding earbuds that you would ever find. And the reason why I kept using these things is because generally earbuds that you find in like your supermarket or like your cheap corner store, like they don't really tend to be all that much better than these. However, this right here has been such a big difference in like my listening experience that if you're listening to a lot of music, especially if you're still using these things, take one of these. Anyway, so far we've only looked at tools and rather outdated stuff like old MP3 players or wired headphones. And I'm actually gonna add on like one more old-timey thing. This right here is a good old-fashioned Nokia, but actually not a good old-fashioned Nokia, a new Nokia that you can still buy today. This is my still-in-use daily driver phone, which a couple years back I actually made a full video about why I think that this thing is so great. What it comes down to is that you have a phone right here for about 20 bucks, which just does full-on calls, like SMS, text, like all that sort of stuff. And because it's so cheap, and because it's a Nokia, which nowadays I know that Nokia is not really owned by the parent company. Back in the day, they used to be metal and fancy, but nowadays they're not really high status symbols anymore, so they're a lot more cheaply made nowadays, but they still have a lot more rigidity and survivability than like the glass and metal sandwiches of the phones that we have nowadays. And because it's so cheap, and because like there's nothing on here like photos or banking stuff or anything, I can take it with me anywhere and I just don't care at all about it. And especially in situations where I want to go out running and I don't really want to take too many things with me like this big ass phone, or in situations where I want to go like and travel but use this thing right here for like all my navigation and like all the important like documents and stuff, then having this thing is so nice because I will always be able to call people with this, even if this battery goes flat. So yeah, I'd still recommend this, but yeah, I mean, like I made a whole video about it, so yeah, that's this Nokia phone right here. get it if you want to. Now for real, let's move on to more modern stuff, which may be more in line with this channel, especially when it comes to computers. Whether you use your computer for boring work stuff, or whether you use your computer for exciting games, there is one thing that really sucks about computers: slowness. Oh, I know the pain of having a computer that just does not want to get on with it. That takes 5 whole minutes to start up. Like, that is just frustrating. In that time, I could have downloaded like 2% of this game update that I want to play. Now, it may just be that your computer is beyond saving old. However, in a lot of cases, this right here is the main culprit, which is the hard disk drive, which basically has been storing all of our data for the longest time that like modern computers have been a thing. The way that this works is it has like a magnetic disk which spins around very fast, and then like there's magnetic locations on there, kind of like a record. Because of that, if it wants to read your data, it has to like spin this disk really fast and then find the physical locations of the data, and that kind of makes it really slow, especially when compared to these things right here, SSDs. These things also store your data just like this thing here, but instead of using like a mechanical disk that spins around very fast, this thing just stores the data on a chip and therefore can be so much more faster in like getting the data that when I put one of these in like that old machine that took 5 minutes to start up, it took about 17 seconds. Yep, that is how big a difference it can be. So if you have a computer, or you know someone who has a computer that's kind of slow because it's still using one of these, really consider getting one of these SSDs. Now, there are 2 different types. There's like the NVMe SSDs, which kind of like slot into a specific slot. And otherwise you also have SSDs, which are just a drop-in replacement with like these pins right here. This will fit any computer, and honestly, it will just make your life so much better. Nowadays, these SSDs tend to go for about like $50 if you want to go for a 1 terabyte version, and about 20 or so bucks if you want to go for like a 500 gigabyte version. I would definitely recommend like 1 terabyte because that seems to be a nice sweet spot in terms of price to amount of storage that you get. Keeping up our computer focused gifts, let's move on to the next item, which is right here, the Harpoon gaming mouse by Corsair. This thing right here is about 20 bucks and you get like a good gaming mouse. But why would you want to get a mouse? Like, to be honest, they're the absolute definition of the afterthought, because when you're building your desktop computer, you're going to be more focused on like the sexy big components like your case or your GPU or your CPU or your memory, and only when you like order all the parts and you're just there with your budget, you think, oh shit, I gotta go get a keyboard and mouse. And then if you're one of those laptop people, like, you'll just buy your entire computer, but only when you start using it and you have to use that horrible trackpad where you have to be like going around like this, you may only decide to like try out a mouse when you just absolutely cannot take it anymore. And the unfortunate thing here is that generally the mice that we tend to get are like kind of your bottom of the barrel mice, like these old ass office mice that you just have laying around somewhere. Or even worse, these very cheap ass corner store mice that cost like $5 and will break like at any moment's notice. I want to emphasize that these things do technically work, but they're not nice. And you may not know how nice they are until you've tried one of these. Now, this mouse right here is about 20 bucks or so, and I have bought like 3 or 4 of these, and I've given them away to people as well because it is just nice. Generally, like, it looks very similar to this thing right here. However, it is so much more nicer to click. It has a nicer scroll wheel than whatever that is. And then it has this button right here, which allows you to change the settings of like the DPI. So you can decide whether you want it to like be very accurate on a very small surface, or actually allow you to have a little bit of play when you tend to like shake it about a bit, that you don't always go from left to right. It's not going to be as good as like the high-end competitive mice in gaming, which can go for like hundreds of dollars. However, it's just a quality good one from a reputable brand that's just like such a big step up from these trash tier mouse or like the secondhand stuff that like your dad hasn't used for ages. It's just an overall good mouse that gets the job done. So that's it for our computer gifts section. I didn't really know I was doing this in sections, but I guess I am right now. And now we're moving on to the final most useful section. Actually, no, I did the most useful at the start. So we're doing the final recommendation for what to put on your Christmas gifts, which actually has absolutely nothing to do with tech at all, which is books. Allow me to risk getting old and boring here, but this is something where I feel rather strongly about. I think that books are such a great gift, especially when it comes to getting older and you don't really know what to ask. It's not really tech, it's not really something that I can recommend to you like, oh, get this book, though I think that like the books right here are actually quite good. But generally what I found is that reading can not only just be very enjoyable, but you can also just learn so much from either someone else's perspective in like a fictional world, or just for like what the author tried to convey to you. Like from these books right here, I would recommend Children of Time if you want to have some sort of like sci-fi adventure, which is just like fun to read. Then if you want to get into like more psychological fiction, then read the Brothers Karamazov. It's a tough read, but definitely worth it if you're into more heavy literature. And then this right here, the Gulag Archipelago, like, oh my god, that is really, really tough. But yeah, this really dives into like the Gulag system, like like the prison system back in the Soviet Union. Like this stuff right here can get so dark, and then to realize that this all happened, like, boy, does that open up your mind in whole different ways than like you can imagine. But the reason why I would recommend books so much is that they're just like, they're the perfect price range. Like a lot of good books tend to go between like 10 and 20 bucks. And honestly, like they're the best present to just ask. Like you can just go online and like look for a couple of like book recommendations, and a lot of times like there'll be some good titles there. But the best thing to do, the absolute best thing to do, is just to go out and say, I'd like some books. Just find some that you like. Because oftentimes people have their own books that are very close to them. So in that sense, asking them to like gift you a book that they think is good is like one of the most personal gifts that someone can give to you. And then you can like learn so much about different fields of life that you may otherwise not have really like dove into because it wasn't something that appealed to you. So those are my recommendations for gifts, which are actually somewhat useful. And I hope that you found this video somewhat useful as well. Because if there's one thing that I know from this time of the year is that it's a lot of fun to look forward to, but it's such a pain in the head to try and find a gift that works for this person, or even worse, try and find a gift to ask for yourself when you already have everything that you kind of want to have. And yeah, like we end this video off like kind of like in the messiest state that, you know, like it looks like Christmas Day, you know, like everything is a mess, everything is a giant mess, and maybe half the things broke when we were unpacking it, but it was a fun experience and we had fun all together. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was a little bit different than other videos. This one I did not have a script for, so I hope that it somewhat came out okay. I kind of made this one spontaneously because I also had to start worrying about gifts from Christmas, and I was like, oh my god, this is such a pain, let me go figure this out in a video. But yeah, because of that, there's also no overtime this week. There's just no time. I'm so sorry. But yeah, if you still want to support the channel for $1 a month, I make extra videos. Not this week, but there's like 13, 14 other videos of like overtime, which you can check out on patreon.com or like on Twitch. You can subscribe for free and you get like all these extra videos. So check it out in the description below. And with that being said, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time.